Hello and welcome to this webinar about instant payments, the new normal in European payments. I have the absolute pleasure of being joined today by a fantastic panel where we have Laura McDermott joining us from Natwest, where she's head of European payment schemes. We have Kristine de Lepeleire, who is the general manager of Belgium's Center for Exchange and Clearing, the Belgian market infrastructure. We have Francis de Roeck, who is our head of industry engagement at BNP Paribas for payments. And then finally, to get the perspective of a corporate treasurer, we have Guillermo de la Fuente, one of the board members of the EACT that's joining us. So thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe to kick things off, Kristine, can you give us a little bit of a flavor of what this legislative proposal around instant payments is all about?
Yes, well, good evening to all of you. Where does it come from? The European Commission is a very big advocate of instant payments, and they would like to become it a new normal, as Kjeld introduced us to. And so basically, they would like instant payments to be available to all the consumers and corporates in the European market. But today, only 13% on average of the SITs are instant payments. Just to tell you, for Belgium, we are at 18.5%, so it's an average, but the average of 13% is a low average. Of course, there are big differences between the countries. It also takes the premise, and it's one of the points inside the regulation, that also the bulk payments, which, for example, in Belgium take like 60% of all payments, should become instant. And so basically, they started looking, why is the take-up of instant payments not as we would have expected as a commission? And so they found 4 reasons why they thought that the take-up is not there. There's not a sufficient incentive in their view for the PSPs to offer instant payments, because it's an optional service. It's not a mandatory service. There are some countries, some PSPs that ask very high fees, so consumers are not really encouraged to go for instant payments. There is a problem of the sanctions screening, where there are a lot of false hits, but in an instant world, there's not much time to look at these hits, which means that in the end, there are more rejects than you are supposed to find with the normal SCTs. And then, of course, there's also the issue of fraud and errors, which some consumers might think are not really treated well inside the instant world, also because we work on the basis of an IBAN only. So starting from these 4 main reasons, the Commission has come up with a legislative proposal. And within this proposal, they try to address each of these points, starting by making instant payments mandatory for all those PSPs that offer normal SCTs to the market, and not only making it mandatory, but making it mandatory through all channels, including the manual channels, including bulk payments, and offering it also for all PSPs, meaning today 1/3 of PSPs still do not offer instant payments, but some of them really don't have a big business into payments. So for them, it's a very big issue to start offering this. So that's the first one. Then for the high fees, they want to do something about the fees, and they would put the fees in line for SCT. So basically, the fees for an instant payment cannot be higher than the fees for a normal SCT. In Belgium, that would mean that, well, they would become part of a package and no longer be billed separately. Then for the sanction screening, they would prevent sanction screening on a transactional basis, which means that if the screening is done on a client basis, you don't need to, in the transaction itself, check if it's a false hit, yes or no, and the transaction can go on very smoothly. And then for the fraud and the errors, they propose to introduce what is generally known as a IBAN name check or a confirmation of Payee service, where the name and the IBAN of the customer, of the beneficiary customer, will be checked. And so basically, this is in a nutshell the proposal of the Commission. Of course, there are very much more details, but I think I might fill the hour if I would continue. But these are the main points, and so yes, sets the floor.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kristine. Now, I'm hearing a lot of Europe that's being talked about. The European Commission has a proposal. Obviously, it still needs to go through the Council and the Parliament before effectively becoming legislation. But fundamentally, this is an adaptation to the SEPA regulation. Now, Laura, I'm curious, how does that sit with UK banks? Because obviously we had Brexit that happened, and EU law no longer directly applies to the UK. So does that mean UK banks are out of shot? What does it mean for them?
So yes, as Kristine described it, it is the EU Commission legislation. So in short, no is the answer. The regulation won't automatically apply to the UK. The European Commission doesn't legislate outside of the EU. But for the UK, I suppose we're going to wait for the final text of the regulation and then look to the EPC to see what that means from a SEPA eligibility criteria, because that's where it may come into play. And SEPA is hugely important to the UK industry. We are keeping a very close watch and brief on this. But no, I suppose the direct answer to your question is no. The legislation doesn't directly apply to the UK.
Okay, so the mechanism through which it would apply then would be through the EPC SEPA scheme, and essentially, if you want to do SEPA, you might have to do instant payments. Is my understanding correct?
It's I suppose it's the equivalence, and waiting to see what comes into play there. So so I suppose we wait for the final legislation. There was a lot of smiling as Kristine spoke about how far the legislation goes. So I think we're in a unique position here where we're having this discussion nice and early because it is draft and plenty of feedback has gone back on it. So I suppose we wait for the final draft to see what it means for the UK.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And when we think about instant payments, most of us, we think about kind of peer-to-peer payments. Those are the traditional use cases that we start off with in that environment. But are corporates also interested in this? And what are you excited about when it comes to instant payments, or what are you worried about? Guillermo, can you give us that perspective from a corporate treasurer?
Hello, good afternoon. Yeah, corporate treasurers, we are aware that instant payments is, let's speak frankly, mainly targeting retailing, merchants, small enterprises as well, and not really instant payments seem to be something that large corporates are not really more interested on it. But we don't have to forget that the large corporates nowadays are not only business to business; they are also related to online retailing, and they are also working in the new technologies and selling very actively through internet, especially after pandemic. So for us, again, the European Treasurers Association is involved in this initiative because we really find it a very important and innovative initiative from the European Union. And we are expert on payments, all kind of payments. That's our most of our daily activity is on payments. So we know how to handle payment. We know what are the weaknesses in the systems are related to payments. We've been contributing many years to the well development of the payment infrastructure. So we want to award to say, and even though we recognize that this really is a very good method of payment for retailing individuals, we want to give our advice, and we also see this as an opportunity to a kind of window open for the corporate treasuries to reduce fraud, because this is something what we are really been working very, very hard in the last years, trying to amend the mistakes made in the PSD2 when the payments are done only with the IBAN, when there is no other checks from banks or PSPs that the IBAN number. This kind of activity, this thing is really damaging the corporate treasuries in terms of fraud, and this is really our main threat. And that's the reason we see this opportunity with this new proposal from the European Union to extend and amend the mistake made in the PSD2. And maybe we want and we hope to advocate very, very strong and on introducing IBAN name check, confirmation of payee, whatever you want to call it. But we need to leverage this proposal to go further and make sure that the payments, cross-border payments, domestic payments, are more secure, are less risk of fraud.
Great, thank you, Guillermo. So that's an interesting perspective, right? That focus on confirmation of payee and reducing fraud, which is, you know, something that we've seen and that we'll come back to in just a minute. So I hear that for corporate treasurers, you know, instant payment has maybe limited capabilities, although I probably there are some interesting use cases. Well, not necessarily it being instant, but at least 24/7, thinking about salary payments or marketplaces or things like that. Francis, just to get your perspective from this as well, obviously a large cash management bank as well. On one side, have you gotten a lot of appetite from your customers for instant payment? And on the other side, we hear this European Commission talking about instant payments. It should just be standard. It should just be the new normal, if you will. Is there still a role for batch payments, or is that something that we should get rid of?
Good question. First of all, good afternoon, and thank you RedCompass for organizing this. The Commission has a dream and an ambitious dream to have only instant. But I say at the end, we're not at the end yet. If we talk about new normal, just ecosystem of new normal, what is an instant payment? An instant payment is, I can say something in seconds. That's first. The second element is it is 24/7 cut of times. You can operate it whenever. And the third feature you have here is the very first instrument where the sender can decide with finality. You can say as a treasurer, I want my salaries being paid at the start of the month, and they will all arrive at 7 in the morning of the first of the month. So you can normally payments, you can send them, and they will be executed whenever they're executed. So these are the three features of a instant payment. If we speak now about that all regular classic credit transfers would migrate, this does not mean that they will all have to be executed in 10 seconds. You will reuse the rails that are built and made for instant payment, regular or classic payments as today. So you can send them the whole day. You have no more cut of times. They will arrive. They will have finality but not necessarily within 10 seconds. And this brings me to your question on what corporates are interested in. Corporates are, of course, interested in sending balance, make them arrive when they want. This is a new feature. We see this often in our corporate treasurers ask, can you give us a intraday cutoff to have this run at mostly early day. Instant payments are by definition unitary. They're not. We have to unbulk the bulks. There's no other way to do this. And is asking this already and putting this in their draft regulation. This can't be executed as such. Have to put a bulk of 100,000 payments on the line. I think the whole system will be within 10 seconds. Nobody has this throughput, has this capacity. It's not possible. So, but if you say, well, have this executed by that moment, then can I start doing this when it will come? The regulation gives other things. This, you have to perform within 10 seconds. I already said very difficult for a bulk, and a name check. I don't know how you can realize this for a bulk. So if they want to keep the bulk in, rewrite this part on bulks. They just added it, but the regulation, the rest of the regulation is at the moment. This being said, I would say hold your horses. There is all these bulk payments. I know that the council, for example, and even has a proposal to withdraw the bulks out of the regulation. The Commission asking in the opposite. So we are for the moment in a trilogue with Council, Parliament, and South. It is not certain that the bulks remain in any regulation as today. But at the end, of course, and now switching back to the new normal, to perform MERS over these same rails. But I think for the moment, batch payments in credit transfers will still remain for a long time.
Absolutely, batch transfers will remain for a long time, and I think I fully echo that as well. And it's one of the things that has come up in a lot of discussions that I've had with banks is, again, this throughput, this capacity to process high volumes of payments, which we can do with batch, but with instant makes it a lot more complicated. Although,
yeah, and I can add to that. Today, a bulk, if I have to put it on the line on an instant and to put it one by one, today within batch payments, I can send bulks and send a whole bulk at one time, which is not possible with instant payments. For another reason, for quite a long time.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Laura, the UK has been a little bit ahead of us when it comes to the uptake of real-time payments. Obviously with faster payments rather than SEPA instant credit transfers. Natwest has been doing them for quite some time. Are there any lessons learned that you can share with the shift to real time from the UK? What can we learn from the UK, and what lessons can we take to Europe?
Well, I'm conscious, I suppose, the faster payments, we are going back quite some time. So a lot of the learnings may be out of date at this point. And we have gone live. I mean, Kristine gave some stark stats at the start of the call there. So we are live on instant in Europe for some years now. But en masse, when the legislation does come into force, and we are given those mandatory deadlines, the ones that would prop up would be the treasury implications is one. I'm sure stepping into Guillermo's space here, but the treasury and liquidity implications of instant versus non-instant and batch is not to be underestimated, especially over the weekend. It's a new service. Forecasting the volumes that will go through will all depend on which products and services are made mandatory again. When we look at the legislation, what does that mean? What will we be left with? What will have to go instant? So the planning for that liquidity, treasury and funding piece is definitely something to be considered. Then an industry-wide approach. This is, I suppose, interesting because back then it was just the UK. This is Europe-wide, but this could be where the trade bodies, the local country groups, the groups that individuals are involved with come to play. Stakeholder management in terms of comms comms is a big one. Interpreting even the legislation when it does come out, and ensuring that even banks in certain jurisdictions are interpreting it the same. And then I suppose last, not to forget about the customer. So implementing instant for all of us is going to be a huge complex task for both the banks and customers. It's just not to forget the customers in this, especially if their customer journeys or certain products will be changed. So to consider the customer support that could be required with any of it is the other call out I'd have.
Fantastic. So yeah, it's not just about doing messaging, it's about adapting your operating model to be customer centric and to be able to manage that liquidity real time, in the weekend, in the evenings. It's about providing support to your customers. One of the other things, Laura, that I saw in the UK was that authorized push payment was really coming up, and especially as
sorry, you're going back. We're going back some time, and actually, it's the pre-UK COP, of course. So so fraud, and I suppose the question was more about learnings. But yes, from a what went wrong perspective, the fraud and the APP is scams. Wider than that, scams of all sorts. Kjeld it was definitely one that fell out, and actually it took some time post faster payments to implement COP. That was a number of years later in 2020. Obviously, this legislation is looking to implement this at the same time as making the instant payments mandatory. So one should alleviate the other is the aim, I suppose, of the Commission.
Absolutely. And now obviously COP is being very widespread in the UK, and I think there's a new proposal as well to even include those PSPs that aren't proposing COP yet. So, and it's interesting if we're looking at it from Europe, from a European perspective, where we have some countries that are already proposing confirmation of payee, but where we don't have it on a cross-border perspective. And I think that very much comes to Guillermo's point, where you need to have a large coverage of the market, right? No, very, very interesting. Kristine, obviously you mentioned that Belgium has quite a high rate of instant payments, and we have some of the larger banks in Belgium even offering instant payments by default. It seems like it's mainly the smaller banks that might have some issues with instant payment, or that are the slow followers. Does it make sense for them to do instant payments, and what challenges do you anticipate?
Yeah, well, I think just to start with, in Belgium, for example, we have like 45% of the banks that adhere to the scheme, but we cover 95% of the accounts. So 95 of the accounts are reachable, and they can in fact initiate instant payments, which already points to the problem for the banks that are not on the schemes yet. They have very, very small volumes of payments, not necessarily, they're maybe into, not really into the payments business, but they have like payments because they're part of the other businesses they are into. And so there's a big question if for those banks, it would be a huge business case, and it's one of the points that's also on the table. Do all PSPs effectively need to participate, or can some of them be left out because really the investment is not in line with the business they can propose? And it's, as Laura said, it's we should not underestimate the impact on the banks. There's a huge cost in terms of infrastructure, in terms of application that has to be built, but also the whole turnaround to go from a batch environment to a real-time environment, and the whole internal organization that needs to be behind on a 24/7 basis. And so also for smaller banks and smaller groups of personnel that are available, this will be a huge challenge. So yes, I think there is some room to advocate that some of the smaller PSPs, depending on the kind of business they offer, should be left out of this mandatory.
Absolutely, and I think that might be one of the lessons learned as well from PSD2. We actually had a client that implemented the PSD2 API infrastructure that spent literally millions on it, and up till now they've gotten a single API call. So they were also facing the same regulation, everyone equal before the law, but where the use cases weren't necessarily there. Now, Laura mentioned some of the lessons learned from NatWest in implementing real-time payments. Francis, can you maybe touch a little bit on what lessons learned you might have from BNP, especially for these smaller players that might have to still go through that journey?
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, on the smaller player, it is an issue. For sure, we are a big player. You can be a small player in some countries where we have to implement it as well. So, which is may not necessarily a good, the best investment is. This being said, lessons learned. First of all, and this is completely what the previous speaker said already. It's way more than just a classic transfer that goes faster. You just review quickly here and there a little bit your actual process, and then if you want to work in a real-time environment, you have to review a complete. Our bank, or the management of our bank, took so many years ago already now, creating a new processing engine for the instant payments, and I think this was to be in this real-time business and environment present. So let's rethink the process and that can work in the future real-time environment. And there will be other things that have to be done. This being said, you have some side effects. You have a help desk that need to run 24/7 that are not that you don't have with credit transfers and that you have with this learned. I think it's as important as the first. Now banks for 95% reachability, okay, in accounts and not in number of banks. That's true. But the banks have delivered the product, but the corporates don't use it yet where it is made for. And so there is still some to deliver on the outside. It is way more than just a credit faster. If you see the world in the previous today, you have the economical world, and then at the end, when you make a transaction, for a bit later, when the bank is open, you can instruct the payment. Today, the payments chain can follow along the real economical immediately. It can be completely integrated. We don't see this happen yet. This is certainly a lot of work to be done in instant payments. It's not because the payment is there, it's finished. Now users can start. You can follow the day long. You can make the payments, and this is will have educational effort we have to deliver and corporates to use.
Thank you.
So this is two main lessons, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're touching on something interesting there as well, right? Because it's also about overlay services, and it's not just the payment, but it's integrating it into the economic process. Guillermo, you touched a little bit earlier as well on, for example, e-commerce and using instant payments in that context. Is that what it's going to take for corporates really to massively adopt instant payments, that overlay services like request to pay, or for example EPI, which is looking at using wallet solutions and having instant payments as underlying settlement mechanism? Is that what you're waiting for, or is it technical challenges in implementing instant payments? What are your thoughts, Guillermo?
Well, in the ADN of a treasurer, prudence is the most important thing. When you look at the equation of risk and reward, what a treasurer is always gonna ask is for not losing money, preserve capital, not lose money, don't get involved in fraud, and make your payments safety and secure. For us, what we do before embracing a new technology is, first of all, making 100% sure that the technology is trustworthy and can be fully secure and fully supported by regulators. And that's the reason when we see a new way of payment like instant payments, I'm not going to say that we are reluctant, but we take our precautions before embracing it widely. And that's the reason when corporate treasurers talking about instant payments, it's not very clear yet what purposes it can be immediately applied. Again, we want to make sure that the new payment system is secure, and we all know that instant payments is the paradise for fraudsters. I'm really surprised and shocked when I read from UK Pay that 98% of the APP payments are coming from instant payments in UK. This is something I still hardly believe, but I read it many times and it's still shocking about it. So again, instant payments means more fraud. That's sure. It's something that fraudsters want to exploit. They want that once a payment is done, it's almost difficult to get back. When we perform a payment now through SEPA or SWIFT, we know that we have maybe 1 day, 1/2 day to go back to the payment and get the payment stop somewhere before final settlement. So what I'm saying here is that we really want to help and work with banks, work with regulators, work with law enforcement, other organizations as well, and make sure that the instant payments, it will be a trustworthy way of sending money from A to B. Again, the new economy is changing very rapidly. Corporates, some classic corporates are now more selling directly to the final customers, especially due to the pandemic. And also the consumer, the final individuals are more embracing payment online. So we, as our corporates, are also adapting to this new normal. So of course, there are more companies that thinking about different solutions or ways to use the instant payments. I can give you some examples from some corporates that we are also sharing with the regulator, and these are, for instance, when my colleagues from the United Nations wants to send money to individuals for any crisis in Europe, they have the possibility to send instant payments. Some cases like airlines wants to refund tickets to customers, and they want to do it quickly. So that's also things that corporate treasurers wants to implement in order to gain client loyalty. Or another example I have discussing this morning as well was some car manufacturer wanted to send the money back to drivers when using a certain technology from supply from them. So there are many different applications. As I said from the beginning, we are not really, we are aware we are not the most profitable or the the side in the economy which will take advantage of the instant payments. For sure, we are not, but we of course will embrace instant payments in the future, because there are many different ways where we can use for corporate treasury. But again, only when we are sure that the payment way is secure, and that's the reason we like this proposal, because it's really taking care and making sure that we don't make the mistakes they were made in some other countries, where there was not enough security and not enough scrutiny also from the sanctions. So I think this is what we like, and this is what we think it could be, first of all, embraced by retailing, and secondly by corporate treasuries in the coming future.
Fantastic. So I hear you. It's all about, covering your risks, making sure that it's a safe payment method, because unlike all other payment methods like credit transfers, in which you can still recall a payment during a small period, or even card payments where you can do chargebacks, it's definitive, and that's why this confirmation is Payee is so important. Now, Laura, before coming to you, let me ask Kristine quickly. Kristine, I think it's something that's been moving in the Belgian market for some time, and I think the Belgian market was a little bit before the legislation in setting up or starting to devise a confirmation of pay solution.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you're facing, and what are some of the things we should take into account?
Well, just to come on the project, we started last year, and it was basically a request coming out of politics where they wanted to reduce fraud. And just for this, I want to say, yeah, it will address part of the fraud, the authorized push payments. It will not address all kind of frauds. Apart from fraud, it will of course address also partly misdirected payments, so it can be of help there as well. So basically, we started last year. The focus we had was on the domestic payments, because there was the request from the Belgian politics to do this for the domestic payments. So we started a project on the domestic payments, started to study what was available in the market, and then all of a sudden came the SEPA regulation with this proposal for the instant payments. So basically for us, now we are a little bit in the middle, because in Belgium, we are working on the domestic part and we don't have a legal basis. So we will work on the basis of legitimate interest. And then will come the SEPA, the European scheme, with which we want to be interoperable, we want to be compliant. And so basically, but it's only for instant payments. We will do it for all payments in Belgium. So that's a little bit, we are on the edge of a project that is already running, while the legislation is still to come and can be of help. So what are our main challenges at this point in time? For us, I think one of the main challenges is the balance between data privacy on the one hand and the fraud prevention on the other hand. As I explained, we don't have a legal basis actually in Belgium. And so basically there's a very strong hands-on of the data privacy authorities on what you can and cannot share, especially with regard to consumer accounts. So for corporates, it's less of an issue, because there you have a lot of public data, but for the consumers, it's a big issue. Also, if you look in the legislation, what they propose is like you have either a match or a no match, or a close match. And in case of a close match, you also have to give an indication how close your match is. And of course there, depending on where the liability lies, this is a very difficult thing to answer, also with respect to this data privacy issues that we have. For the rest, I think, yes, it's also a project that only has value if the whole community will work together on this. So for one bank, it's not really, for the customer, it will not add a lot. So also there, we need to move with the whole community, getting the project on the budgets of all the banks. Also there, I think we have a big challenge. And then, yes, that's I think the main things. There are other challenges, of course, but these are the main things that we, are working on.
And then we obviously need to develop something that's interoperable with all these existing schemes or maybe replacing them. One of those existing schemes being COP in the UK. Laura, do you have any lessons learned again from the UK? Any advice that you could give to Kristine in setting this up? If you could start COP anew, any ideas how you would do that?
Yes, so obviously the setting up of COP is much more recent in UK, so there definitely be a lot of learnings there, and I do expect when the EPC do what looks like they will take over the setting up of the scheme rules for this, there'll be a task force, and I'm sure there'll be definitely UK involvement there. I think we've already offered that up. So what sort of learnings? I suppose clear technical specifications. Don't leave anything up to interpretation. Interpretation, I think, is what gets us all into trouble. A central simulator to test the individual bills meeting the specifications is very important. There's no solution out there now. So this is where it starts now, and the problem will be those individual solutions meeting the same specifications. Name matching, I suppose that goes without saying. Personal and the difference between corporate, not to be underestimated. The problems that were, I mean, the trading names, the different aspects there. We had a lot of businesses opt out until that was fixed. So good data, that was definitely another learning. Customer comms as well, clear instructions of how to actually input the data, and then like Kristine said, that the big improvement was misdirected payments as opposed to scams. Some scams are addressed, but the fraudsters are always one step ahead. So definitely has made huge improvements with misdirected payments. But the industry working groups as well that were set up at Payee really did assist there. And again, that's where I think the task force and feedback and communities talking to each other will really play a key role.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. And
Kjeld, Francis here.
Yeah, perfect. And we hear you so much clear now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm back. Yes. Am I allowed to intervene very briefly? Might be useful information for the audience as well. So what you need for COP is, of course, if you want to do it at European level, a harmonized rules. And the EPC, the European Payments Council, decided in their board of last week to build this harmonized rules and to put them together. They will deliver a first proposal by June, July of this year that comes then in a public consultation, so that by, let's say, somewhere October, November, we will have a set of harmonized rules within Europe on the confirmation of Payee. I think this can be a useful piece of the puzzle to solve this regulation.
Thank you, Francis. And that's going to be a huge challenge, harmonizing it, dealing with all these regional nuances. And even within the SEPA zone, we have different alphabets that we need to deal with. So the EPC definitely has a challenge cut out for them.
Yeah, correct.
Guillermo, I have a double question for you. So Laura mentioned on one side for corporates, there were some challenges as well with trading names, legal names, and all of that. Actually, one of your associates from EACT, your colleague François Masquelier, yesterday, I believe, published an article purporting to use LEI's legal entity identifiers as the solution to unambiguously identify businesses. So I'd be interested to get your comment on that on one side. And on the other side, we talk about, most of your payments, as you said, still bulk payments. And obviously, most of these payments are coming into the bank pre-authorized. So whereas the legislation says between entering the payments and executing it, if you're sending your payments in over SWIFT channels or FileAct or SFTP, those come in pre-authorized. So on one side, LEI, what are your views there? And on the other side, how are you going to integrate this into your processes?
That's a very good question. I really thank you for asking it, because as I say at the beginning, we were really, I mean, the European Treasurers Association was advocating for mitigating payment fraud, and that's the reason we firmly believe that the confirmation of Payee could really help us as corporate treasurers to reduce the main threat that we were facing, which is basically impersonation of invoices and the famous CFO fraud. When we made a forensic analysis of the situation, we find out that the main the weakest point where that there was not really a match from the bank account and the account holder and many other factors in the payment structure. And when we were in the middle of that kind of advocacy, working with the Financial Stability Board, as you know, the Financial Stability Board make a report in October and just another one a couple of weeks ago, where they really recommend the utilization of LEI in payments. As you know, in India, it's already compulsory from the Central Bank of India for certain amount of the rupees, but it's indeed already a compulsory factor that you need to add when you make a payment in that country. So, as I say, we've been working with the Financial Stability Board. We had long discussions with different panels there, and I think we managed to convince the Financial Stability Board that using LEI will be really a good factor to identify the using as a single identifier for corporates. And this is where the main challenge really arrives, is because we are talking about LEI. LEI, as you know, is for corporates, is not for individuals. So we don't really think LEI could be the solution when dealing with domestic payment, when you have maybe or individual domestic payments, when you have a ID number, or when you have a passport number, or when you have something else. But when we're dealing with cross-border payments, we really advocate for LEI, because LEI is already broadly used. As you know, every time a corporate enter into a finance transaction, they need an LEI number. Without LEI, a corporate cannot make any FX trade, cannot make any financial activity which requires really this LEI number. So this is something already very well spread in the industry. The LEI is managed and supervised by a non-for-profit organization, which is the GLAIF, and the GLAIF is really part of the G20, has been promoted by the G20, and it's really an organization where there is no any profit seeking. So all the data that you can find at GLAIF is open source data, so there's nothing you have to pay for it, and it's really for us. We've been working with them and we've been testing them, and we come to the conclusion that that's the best thing when making cross-border payments, using LEI as a factor which identify clearly your corporate, and also at the same time will make the confirmation of Payee much easier, because you will confront it to only one series of numbers and digits, and instead of a corporate name or a text or a person individual name or last name. So in order to do the match, it will be really much easier. But again, we don't think the LEI should be compulsory as is in India. We understand that there are small and medium corporates that they don't know what the LEI is, and they are also corporate treasurers, and we need to also understand that. So that's at the end, what I'm trying to say is that we think LEI is very positive, and it could be an extra add or help for making payments more secure.
Fantastic.
And there was another question about
how to integrate it into your systems, but I'm just being a little bit mindful of time here.
Yeah.
So let me actually jump onto the next topic, which is another part of the legislation, is saying that instant payment should be free, whereas there is some room to make confirmation of payee a paying service. Laura, what are your thoughts about that? Should we, or not free, but at least not at a premium compared to SEPA credit transfer? Laura, what are your views on that? And then I'll come to Francis to get your thoughts on that as well.
Kjeld, I think you've taken an interesting angle there, that the confirmation of pay may be the angle to make money. I don't think that's in the spirit of the legislation. For anyone from the EU Commission who's joined us today, but I suppose from a UK perspective, we don't charge for confirmation of payee where it's part of the mobile or online journeys. The benefit really is the fraud and the error reduction, and I suppose, and Kristine is quite close to this, the saving in those payments redirection and errors really is the saving there. For the banks and the providers, but we do charge for corporates, I suppose, in the interest of transparency, for use of confirmation of pay when validating bulk payment files. But I don't think the charging is the angle here. I don't think we can lose sight of the overall objective for confirmation of pay, unless Kristine has a different take.
No, but of course, there are more and more rules and more requests and on top. And at some point in time, I guess our banks need to look into their business cases. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's part of the game. And it even comes more, I think, for the payments, for the instant payments, because again, I've not the perspective of a banker, but instant payments, as we said before, it requires a huge infrastructure, and especially if we think that at some point in time, instant payments might become the new normal, and all or big volumes would go over those rails. It means, in terms of infrastructure, to reach the required transaction per second, a lot of money. And so, there's nothing like a free lunch.
No, I suppose I more meant from the charging of the confirmation of pay. I completely agree there, and I think the lack of business case is really where we've struggled to get the numbers. And I know, speaking from a bank's perspective, the mandatory angle is the way to get the funding over the line, because there probably wasn't the business case from a commercial perspective.
Yeah. Maybe to close the panel, Francis, what are your thoughts as well? How are banks going to make money on all of this?
It is still early day. The regulation has not yet been voted, and you're already asking me what pricing we put on it. But this being said, an IBAN and a name check is in fact a small part of my KYC. It is a small part, but it is still a part of the KYC. KYC, I have very hard to build. I met each and every single client. We call in our language about bank-graded quality. I know all these clients and their linked IBANs. And we maintain all this. So this has a tremendous cost to operate, to keep your KYC. To put it in an IBAN name check, a confirmation of Payee system, being real-time available, 24/7 and all this stuff. has a real cost as well. Who says cost says value. Kristine already said there is no free lunch. So somewhere it needs to be paid by somebody, to be seen how it is charged, if it is part of general charges or individual by consultation. It's too early yet, but somebody pays it anyway somewhere. You can't deny this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we each have 1 minute.
Say a last word on it.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's very important you trade off between the cost of fraud and the cost of implementing an additional safety net, implementing confirmation of Payee. So I think when you balance the cost of the fraud, which all know that is increasing in double digits every year, and you see that implementing confirmation of Payee, you can mitigate. I think this is something also it needs to think about when you talk about the cost of confirmation of Payee, not just seeing the one side of the balance.
Well, just a very quick reply. It is not very clear if you read the documents. If errors are reduced, fraud, it is not certain, or different kind of fraud. The countries that don't have it say that fraud will be reduced, and the countries that have it in place have the same fraud rate as the others that don't have it in place. So it certainly reduces at some point some fraud and reduces errors, but all need to be proven still. But well, we are at the end of the conference. So, but would be a nice debate on that, Kjeld.
Absolutely, and I think we could keep this debate going for hours because there's so much coming at us, and we're not even there at the final legislation yet. So we'll see how that evolves over time. But in any case, so much to do still. Looking forward to see how it evolves, and maybe we'll have this debate again next year to see how we stand then. But I would like to thank all of our panelists so much for joining us today. Kristine, Laura, Guillermo, Francis, it was fantastic having your point of views. And I look forward to seeing where this takes us next. And hopefully let's do this again next year and see where we are then. Thank you for joining us, also to the audience. If you have any questions or you want to learn more about instant payments and confirmation of Payee and what it can mean for your bank, because we haven't even covered everything, we haven't even touched the sanctions components on it, please don't hesitate to reach out and we'll be happy to discuss with you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.